Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're just seeing my video, you're welcome. My name is Stella. All right, so today we're going to be altering our A-line pattern, okay, that we have on this channel to make this beautiful dress, okay. Now we had previously drafted an A-line pattern, okay. I'll leave the link in the description box. So that's the pattern I'm going to be altering today to make this beautiful dress, okay. So let's jump right into the alteration. Okay, I'll start by marking out my yoke on the front pattern. For the yoke part, we'll go ahead and measure now from the starting point, okay? We'll measure it down to, I want to make use of 8 inches for her yoke. Now, we'll measure the 8 inches across. This is why we've not cut out, so that we're sure we're working with a straight line. So we'll measure the 8 inches across like so, and then we're cutting this way, okay. So this is just 1 inch, so this is just 1 inch before the chest line. So we're going to be cutting on this line now, okay. We'll cut on this line. Okay, so this is the back pattern. Now let's go ahead to mark our yoke as well. Remember, for the front we placed our tape from the starting point and we came down by 8, okay. So we're doing the same for the back. From the starting point, we'll mark our 8 inches, okay. Now this is 8 inches for the back, okay. Now, well, for this back, I don't want it to be straight like the front, okay. For the back, I don't want it to have this straight shape. I want to slant it a bit. So I'm going to slant it to this chest line like so, okay. So I'm going to slant it to the chest line like so, okay. Now this is the back. This is how I want the back to look, okay. Now remember our back tightening. Remember the lines for the back tightening. So this is our yoke. This is our yoke line for the back. Now the next thing we're going to do for the back is to create. I don't want the zip. I want the zip to stop here, okay. So uh, the next thing we're going to do for the back is to have like a curve from the end of this neck to our chest line. Now I want it to, from this line, I want it to be, say, 0.25 away from the zip line, okay. I don't want it to enter the zip line, so let's say 0.25 away from the zip line. That's the way I want it. Now let's connect with a slight curve. Now this is the way I want the back to appear. Let's measure the distance. It's about 0.9. It's not up to 1 inch. Okay, so this is where I want the yoke at the back to look, okay. Now remember, it's 0.25 away. Now I like to write 0.25 away from the zip line, so that when it's time to fix the yoke, you will know. Now the next thing for us to do is to add our zip allowance. Remember, all allowances are included in this pattern, okay. Now I want to use 1 inch zip allowance. So from this our tightening, I'll come out by 1 inch, okay. So when I'm cutting, this is now my new line, okay. So I'm going to cut my back this way, stop the yoke here, then continue the lower part this way. So I'll go ahead and continue to add my 1 inch zip allowance. This is how I'm going to be cutting my back, then the yoke as well. Let me darken that so we can see. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead This is my back. Okay, now this is the yoke for the back. So I'm going to follow the markings and cut out, and I'll show us the cutting process as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut. So that's it for the front. Okay, now let's cut our yoke. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. When we're placing on fabric, we'll add 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch here. Okay, this is it for the front. So let's cut the back. Okay, so this is what we have here. We'll go ahead and add 0.5 inch allowance for joining and 0.5 inch allowance for these two joinings. Okay, now can you see? So you see why I said I like to write, so that when you're joining you will not be confused and start it from here. So we're starting after you fix this allowance. Here is our 1 inch for the zip. Then we'll go ahead and move in by 0.25 away from here, and then we'll fix our back yoke. All right, so that's it. We'll go ahead and transfer to our fabric, and I will see us. All right, guys, so it's time for us to cut. Remember that the front is on fold. Okay, the front is on fold. Now I've added our 0.5 inch joining allowance here. Okay, now I'll go ahead and cut. Okay, so cut out the front, then we'll go ahead, place and pin, then cut out the back. You can notch your points. That's the hip point and the waist. This will guide you when you're fixing. And then the center point here, I'll go ahead and give it a notch. Okay, so I'll pin the back, cut, then show us. Okay, so I've cut out the back. This is the back piece. I've cut it out. Now next thing we'll do is to go ahead and cut our yokes. Okay, all right guys, so let's do a little calculation for our sleeve. Okay, now the first thing you're going to do is to cut out your sleeve. Okay, so I've gone ahead to cut out my sleeve. Now this sleeve length is measuring 11 inches. Okay, but the total sleeve is 22. Now when I mean total sleeve, I mean from my shoulder to this wrist. Okay, and I'll also be referring to this as the shorter part of the sleeve. Now it's 22 inches, but the longer part, that's the part that will drop, is going to be 29 inches. Okay, so that when I start using these terms you will understand. Now let's proceed. Remember I said that this sleeve length is 11 inches. Okay, now let's proceed with our calculations. Okay, all right, so let's proceed with the calculations. Now remember I said that the upper sleeve, I'll call it the upper sleeve. The upper sleeve length is 11 inches. Okay, now the round sleeve for this same upper sleeve, the round sleeve for this same upper sleeve. Okay, now the round sleeve minus the allowances is 12. All right, now remember I told us that from my shoulder to where I want the short part to stop is measuring 22 inches. So let me call it my total sleeve for the shorter part. That's 22 inches. Now we'll go ahead and subtract this sleeve length, which is 11, from the total of 22 inches. So we're going to do 22 minus 11, and that will give us 11. Okay, so this shorter part is 11 inches. Now for the longer part, that's the one that will drop, the length from your shoulder to where it will drop to is 29 inches. So let's call it our total sleeve length for the longer part. That's equals to 29 inches. Then we're also going to go ahead and subtract this one from it. Okay, now 29 minus 11, that will give us 18 inches. Okay, now that will give us 18 inches. Now let's get the radius that of our high-low. Now to get the radius, we're simply going to take this round sleeve. Okay, now the round sleeve of 12 divided by 6.28, and that will give us 1.9. Okay, so that will give us 1.9. Now I want to approximate that to 2 inches. Okay, so instead of the 1.9, I'm going to be working with 2 inches. Okay, now we'll go ahead with our cutting. Okay, so let's go ahead with our cutting. Now this is the adire that we'll be working with. Okay, the width is measuring is 31 inches. Okay, the width is measuring 31 inches. Now the first thing you're going to do is fold it into two this way. Okay, fold it into two. Now mind you, your high-low sleeve can be as wide as, but my client does not want it very elaborate. Okay, so we're making like a minimal high-low. Okay, but if you want it wider than this, just get your by 45 or by 60 fabric and fold it into two, just as wide as you want it. But for this one, this is the fabric I want to work with. I told us that the width is 31. Now simply fold it into two like so. Okay, now remember that this is adire and it can shift. So the first thing you will do is just pin, so that you're sure that when you're making another fold, it's not going to shift. Okay, now I folded into two like so. The next thing is for us to fold again. Okay, so we'll go ahead and fold again. Now in folding this second time, we will bear in mind our initial calculation. Remember that our radius is 2 inches. Now we're going to use this shorter part to cut out the short part. Okay, remember I told us that the one that I want the length to stop here. After we subtracted this, we were left with 11 inches. Okay, now we're going to add 11 inches to the radius. Now that will give us 13. So you go ahead and mark. You see it's not up to 13, so we still fold further. Okay, so we'll go ahead and mark. Okay, great. Now we'll go ahead and measure. Okay, so we'll go ahead and first measure our radius of 2 inches. Okay, we'll take our radius of 2 inches this way. Now this is our radius of 2 inches. Now let's mark the length of the shorter part, which is 11. You can go ahead and add your allowance for the joining, but I will not. I will still take 0.25 from here. Okay, so we're taking it from the starting point like this, from this starting point to the 11 that we have marked, and that's 13. Okay, 2 inches radius, 11 inches length, so that's 13 inches. Now we'll keep shifting our tape to mark the 13 inches. Okay, but as we are going further, we'll keep adding to the measurements. Okay, we can do 13.5 there, 14. Okay, like that. Remember our fabric, we can do 14 here as well, and then we can do 14.5 here. Just keep adding to the measurement, and then when you're done, you connect it with a curve like so. Okay, we're connecting our measurements with our markings with a curve. Okay, So I've connected with a curve. Remember, our radius is still intact. Now the next thing we're going to do is to mark the longer length. Remember, after we subtracted this one, we were left with 18. So we still come back to this very tip, place your tape, and remember 18 plus the 2 inches radius, that will give us 20. Okay, so we still come back here and mark our 20 inches. We'll keep marking that, but this longer one, as we are coming back to this side, the number is reducing. So from 20 you're marking 19. Okay, can you see the number is reducing? We can first start with 19.5, then to 19, like that. Okay, then we'll connect it back to this point here with a slight curve. Okay, can you see what I've just done? So we're connecting it back with a slight curve, like so. We first marked the shorter part, then we'll go ahead to mark the longer part. Okay, so you use your chalk to blend your curve, like so, and then we're going to go ahead and cut. But in cutting, we'll first cut the longer part. Okay, like this. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Now let's cut the shorter part. Remember, when you're cutting the shorter part, you don't cut all of them at the same time. You raise it up. See what I'm doing? You raise it up like so. Then I'm cutting only the up part. So can you see what we have? This is what we have. Can you see? Okay, so we'll go ahead and open it. But before you do that, kindly notch so that you will know your points. Okay, now we have a joining here, so automatically that's our an indicator. Okay, now we'll go ahead and open it. Oh, our pin. Okay, and here we have it. The sleeve is ready. Oh, we still have another pin. And here we have it. It's ready. Okay, here we have it. Is ready. Now you wear it and it will drop this way. I'm still going to go ahead to line this. Okay, so we'll see the finished look. I'll also go ahead and cut the second sleeve. Then we'll see in the sewing room. Okay. All right, guys, you're welcome back. Okay, so we'll go ahead and join the pieces. Okay. Now this is the back pieces. Okay, the two back pieces. Okay, so the first thing you will do. Okay, so these are the two. This is the back piece. Okay, so the first thing you will do is to go ahead. Remember, we left 1 inch zip allowance. Okay, so the first thing you will do is to go ahead and mark your 1 inch zip allowance. Okay, like so. You mark it all the way to the hem. Okay, you mark your 1 inch all the way to the hem, and then you sew. Okay, now while sewing, you need to place your zip. Okay, now you're going to measure down to your hip line. Remember, from her waist to her hip is 9 inches. Okay, now at that point you make a mark. Now that's where you'll be stopping your zip. So you'll be sewing a loose stitch from the starting, like so, to the hip line. Okay, then from here you're going to make a tight stitch all the way to the hem, like so. Now I've gone ahead to do that. Okay, and then I've also pressed it open. Okay, so if I turn it to the right side, you can see that it's flat. Okay, I've pressed it open, and I did the same for the lining. as well. Okay, so I went ahead to cut out the lining pieces. Okay, so this is the lining, and this is the lining for the front, this is the lining for the back as well. Okay, now this is the lining for the back. I have stitched down my 1 inch all the way to the hem, like so. Now I'm going to go ahead and take off the pins and press it. Okay, I'll go and open up this stitch line with my pressing iron like I did on the main fabric. Now I also went ahead to cut out this piece of fabric. Is measuring 3 inches. Okay, so that's what we're going to be pleating on the yoke part. Okay, now this is the yoke. This is the yoke that we cut out. Okay, now I also went ahead to cut out my tool net. You can see my tool net. Now I will use this tool net to turn the neckline. Okay, so this is the front. I'm only using the tool net to turn the neckline. Okay, now this is the back piece as well. This is the back yoke as well. I have the tool net pinned on it, so I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and use it to turn this neckline and this curve that we have here. You remember the curve when we are cutting? So I'm going to use 0.25 to turn the neckline and then 0.25 to turn this curve, like so. I'll repeat the same thing on this other piece of the back. Okay, so and I'll press it. I'll press the front as well, then I'll show us. Now for the sleeve, I have the tool net under it as well. Okay, so for the sleeve, I'm not turning it with the net. I'm only going to top stitch round the main sleeve, like so. I also did the same on the other piece of sleeve. Okay, so we're not turning. We're just going to use we're just going to go to the sewing machine and stitch on top of it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stitch these, press them, then I'll come back and show us what next. Okay, so I'm done turning the neckline with the tool net. Okay, so I turned the neckline and I went ahead to just stitch this down. Okay, so I stitched it down just on top of it. Okay, the tool net is under, and the shoulder and the armhole area, they are still open. I've not stitched, I didn't stitch it down. Okay, now because we're going to be joining the shoulders. Okay, now that's it for the front yoke. Okay, so this is the back yoke. Okay, so I've turned the neckline, and this curve that we have here, I turned it with the tool net. Then I went ahead to top stitch the, down here. So I only stitched it down here. Okay, I've turned the neckline and the curve that we have here. Now the armhole and the shoulder, they are still there. I've not stitched on it. Okay, now the sleeves, I also went ahead to stitch down the sleeve. Okay, the tool is under, so like I explained to us, I only stitched round, like so. I did the same on the other sleeve as well. Okay, now it's time for us to join our yoke. Okay, so pick up the, okay, so before we get to the yoke, let me show us the back. I have fixed my zip at the back. Okay, this is the inside. I'm going to overlock all these rough edges when I'm done. Okay, now I fixed my zip on the inside. Okay, this is the way the rest of them is. Remember, we're 1 inch, so, and this is the lining of the back as well. Okay, I stitched on the 1 inch. Then I went ahead to press. Okay, then I took out the stitches. Okay, so this is what the back looks like. Now let's go ahead and fix our yoke. So we'll start with the front. Okay, so let's start with the back. You can start with anyone, but let's start with the back. Now for the back, you go ahead and unzip. Okay, Then you position your yoke like so. Okay, so you place your yoke like so. Then we'll go ahead and use our pin to join. Okay, now remember we came in by 0.25 when we are cutting, so we're going to start joining our yoke from the armhole side. So you're simply going to flip your yoke backward like so. Okay, aligning the armhole side. Okay, now go ahead and pin. So I'm done pinning one side. I'll go ahead and pin this other side as well. So I've pinned. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to align the lining on it. Okay, now remember that the right side of the net is facing the right side of the main fabric like so. Now we're going to place the lining the right side inside, okay, like so. So the right side is facing inside. Then we'll go ahead and pin it down as well. Now the two net is in the middle of both the fabric and the lining, so we'll go ahead and pin that down too. Okay, now I'll pin this other side like so as well. I'm done pinning. Now the next thing we're going to do is to use 0.5 to stitch. Okay, so we'll use 0.5. We'll mark our 0.5 from here all the way. Okay, then we're going to stitch from this armhole area this way. Okay, then on top of the zip as well. Okay, we'll do the same on this other side. Okay, then for the front, we're basically doing the same. You place your fabric right side up. Okay, then you pick up the yoke. We're placing it right side facing the right side of the main fabric like so. Okay, before we attach the yoke, we need to pin down our pleats. Okay, so for the tiny fabric that we're going to be pleating, okay, so I went ahead to cut out the fabric measuring. This is 3.5. okay, so we're going to use 1/2 inch to join it here. Okay, now the first thing you're going to do is to come in by 0.5 from this armhole area so that it will not enter into the sleeve when you're joining. So you come in by 0.5 here, you come in by 0.5 here as well. Okay, so you're going to attach this piece of fabric like so. Okay, you place and pin. Now you come to this end as well, you place and pin. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and pleat this on this space that we have here. Okay, just a tiny pleat. Then after we pleat, we'll go ahead and place the yoke, the front yoke, right side facing the right side of the fabric like so. Okay, then we're going to stitch on it using 0.5. After that, I'll use the lining to turn the front as well. So I'm also placing the lining on it, aligning the notches, okay, that we have. Then I'll also sew it using 0.5. okay, so the first thing we're doing is pleat on this, then join the yoke, then we'll use the lining to turn the entire front piece, and then I'll come back and show us. Okay, all right guys, you're welcome back. So I've gone ahead to pleat this like I explained for us. Okay, then I've joined my yoke. I've also turned it with I've also turned the back with lining. Okay, so and this is the back piece. Okay, now I fixed my yoke, I fixed the zip. Okay, then I also went ahead to use our lining to turn the yoke area and the zip as well. Okay, now, okay, so the next thing for us to do is to mark our side seams. Now remember that when we were cutting, we added 1.75, okay, as our allowance. Now we're going to mark 1 inch. Okay, so now we're going to mark 1 inch like so. We're going to mark 1 inch all the way down. Okay, so I'll go ahead and mark my 1 inch all the way from the armhole area down to the hem. Okay, I'll mark it on all the pieces, both on the lining and on the front piece as well. Okay, so it simply means that we are adding 0.75 as our ease. Okay, so I'll go ahead, mark my 1 inch, and we'll go and join. Okay, but before we join, we will need to join our shoulders. Okay, now you place it like so. So you place it this way, the right side facing you. Then you place the front. You place the front on it like so. Okay. Okay. So you place the front on it. Okay. So we have right sides facing each other like so. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and join our shoulders. Okay. Now simply pick up the front piece. Okay, so we'll pick up the back piece, open it up like so. Okay, then pick up the front piece. Now we're going to be aligning these joinings at the neck. Okay, so we'll spread it and we'll go to the machine and join using 0.5. We'll do the same on the other shoulder. Then I'll go ahead and join my 1 inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to stitch on those lines, both on the fabric and on the lining. Then I'll come back and show us. Hi guys, you're welcome back. Okay, so I've gone ahead to join the shoulders. Okay, I've joined the shoulders the way I explained for us. Okay, now I also went ahead to join my side seams. Okay, now I've stitched on them. So I stitched and pressed, did the same on the lining as well. Let me show us the inside. Okay, so this is the inside of the fabric. Okay, this is the back and this is the front. Okay, now for the lining, I went ahead to reduce the length of the lining by 5 inches. Okay, so then I gave it a good press. Now the next thing for us to do is to, okay, hold on, let me show you that 3 inches fabric that I pleated. Okay, can you see it? So I pleated it and I just did it the way I explained for us. Okay, now the next thing for us to do is to fix our sleeve. So here is a piece of the sleeve that I have turned. Okay, I've turned it with a doll face satin. Okay, I've turned this with a doll face satin. I went ahead to give it a good press. As you can see, it's relaxing well. Okay, so and what's next for me to do now is to go and join my sleeve. Her round sleeve is 12, so I'll go and take my measurement 6 inches and then stitch it up till here. Then I'll join this to this sleeve. Okay, then I'll fix it to the armhole, but let me go ahead and show us how to do it. So now the second piece of the sleeve. Okay, so I went ahead to trace it out on a bridal satin. This is a doll face satin. Okay, so you place it, you spread it, and you cut out exactly as you can see. But the difference is that for the satin, I've not cut out the radius. Okay, now the satin is still complete. I've not cut out the radius. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do now is to go ahead and use 0.5 to turn this round. Okay, so we're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch on 0.5. round this, but in stitching you're going to come in here. Okay, so but in stitching you're going to come in here from this center part. Okay, that's the front side. We'll come in here by, let's say, 2 inches. So you will leave 2 inches away from this part, okay, that has a joining. So we're stitching 0.5 from here all the way around, and then when we get here as well, we're also leaving 2 inches. Okay, now if you noticed, I fixed it. You can see the way it's relaxing well. Okay, now if you go ahead and just place this and stitch everything around, it won't relax like this. Okay, we're going to do it this way. Okay, so we'll leave 2 inches from this point and stitch around using 0.5. Then we're leaving 2 inches from here as well. Okay, so we're stitching around. Then the next thing we're going to do is to use our chalk to trace out the radius on the satin. Okay, because we're going to be cutting that out when it's time. Now you trace out the radius like so. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is to give a notch at this point. Okay, remember that this front part is the short part. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and give a notch here to signify that part. Okay, then we'll go ahead and turn it to this other side. Okay, now after you turn, you can, okay, so before you turn, because we need to be able to get a straight line, a line that will match this one, so you go ahead and use anything or maybe a pin and just pin down there. Okay, then go ahead and turn it to this side. Okay, now we can see the pin. Okay, so you go ahead and just make a mark there because we are going to be marking a straight line. Then the next thing to do is we need to connect from this notch here to this part using a straight line. You can do this with your ruler. We'll go ahead first and stitch. So after we stitch, remember we're stopping here. Okay, then the next thing we will do is to slit this place open, but you can do this after you have stitched. Okay, so I'll stitch it round using 0.5, then I'll come back and show us what next to do. Okay, so I'm done joining it. Okay, let me show us on the wrong side so that the color will show. Okay, so I'm done stitching around and I still left our space. You remember the 2 inches gap I said that we should leave, okay, on the both sides. Now the next thing for us to do is to go ahead and cut on this center. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and cut on this center like so. Okay, so the radius of the satin is out. Now the next thing we're going to do now is to join. Okay, now in joining we're going to take off the pins. Okay, we're going to pick the main fabric like so. Can you see? Okay, remember this is the way it is. Now you're going to go ahead and pick up the main fabric alone. Okay, now, okay, so pin. Okay, I'm done pinning the main fabric. I'll flip it to the other side. I'll also use my pin to join. Remember we're joining with 0.5. Okay, so I'll also use my pin to join the bridal satin. So I'm done pinning the satin as well. Okay, now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, but before we do that, from this part you will measure 2.5 inches down. Okay, you measure the same 2.5 inches on the satin. and you give a mark there. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get our sewing machine. Then we're using a tight stitch, that's a normal stitch, to stitch from the beginning here to that 2.5. Then from the 2.5 we're going to use a loose stitch till the end. We'll repeat the same on the satin as well. We're going to use a normal stitch, that's a tight stitch, to stitch from the beginning here to this 2.5. Then from this 2.5 you will back stitch, then we'll continue with a loose stitch. After that I'll go ahead and press it. Okay, I'll press the seam lines open, then I'll come back and show us what next to do. Okay, so I'm done stitching on the 0.5. Okay, and then I've pressed it. I did the same on the satin as well. I've pressed it. Now it's time for us to loosen the loose stitch. Okay, so we'll lose it until we get to that 2.5 mark that we have here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and lose. Okay, so I'm done taking off the stitches. Okay, so what we have now is just the 2.5 inches mark that we have. I did the same on the satin as well. I've taken off the loose stitches. What we have now left is the 2.5 inches. Okay, now it's time for us to join. So what we're going to do is pick up one side, which is the satin and the main fabric. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and join this using 0.5. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mark our 0.5 like so, then follow the crease line that we have. Okay, remember our crease line, so we're going to follow it and then join the two together like so. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and join stitch on these marked lines that I have. Okay, so we're stitching from here now upwards, okay, till we get to that 2.5 mark here. Okay, once you see that stitch, you stop. We're going to pick up this other piece as well and mark our 0.5. Okay, then align these two together, then stitch on it upwards like so till we get to this place. So I'll stitch it, then I'll come back and show us so we can turn it together. Okay, so I'm done sewing it down. Okay, so I've stitched round like so. Okay, now it's time for us to turn. We've turned. I'm going to go ahead and press. Okay, you can see the back, you can see how it's laying flat. Okay, this is the front as well. You can see how it's laying flat. Okay, now I'll go ahead and give this a good press, then I'll come back and show us. Okay, so I'm done. I've pressed. You can see that it's relaxing well now. This is the inside. Okay, and that's it. So I'll go ahead and stitch this area down. Okay, now I'll after that, then I'll attach my sleeve. Okay, so to attach my sleeve, her round sleeve is 12, so 12 over 2 is 6. I'll go and stitch. Okay, then I'll come in and just fix it in. Okay, then grab it from the satin part and stitch round this circle like so. Okay, I'll stitch it round, then I'll attach it to the main dress. Okay, so that we don't make this video longer. So I'll attach it to the main dress, then I'll come back and show us. All right guys, so we're done. Okay, so I went ahead to form a rose with the fabric, and then I also formed a button with the fabric as well. Okay, so kindly subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in my subsequent videos. Bye.